Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about what an acceptable Stanley Cup champion is. And I did a video on this over 5 years ago. I did take a look through my channel's history. I was like, when was it I did that? And I've moved twice since the last time I did a video on which team would be acceptable or teams wouldn't be acceptable. So I've got some teams here that I'm going to put next to a happy face. So if I feel like teams would generally be happy to see them win, fans would be happy, media would be happy, all of us would be like, you know what? That's great. You take that Stanley Cup and you just enjoy that. Then there's the shocked, where they won, but coming into the season, we didn't think they'd be any good. Then there's, this is actually Kevin Malone from The Office being fed broccoli. Doesn't really like it, but he eats it. One of my favorite scenes. He's like, this is terrible. I'm like, yeah. So that's, yeah, they'll take it, but they're not all that happy about it. And then there's the, oh God, no, please no, right there. And then this is a magnet that it's a sticker I got from Hot Topic that I turned into a magnet. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I need that. I need that because it's a happy looking bunny. We have a bunch of bunnies and it says this sucks big time, which there are certain teams that people would say this sucks big time. Now, there's no consensus, so I'm not going to say this is 100%, and this is just an approximation on my part. And I will try to put them in one of these four spots. So the Washington Capitals starts things off. Now, for me, the Washington Capitals, to me, it'd be a bit of a shock, but also I think fans would be happy to see them win when it looked like their window was closed. And I'm kind of torn, so I'm going to put it in between the Sylvester shocked and the happy face up here. So I think fans would generally be relatively happy, but there would be some shock as well because it looks like their window's closed. Now, for the Winnipeg Jets, I think we would see people happy for the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg franchise, going back to when they were the original Winnipeg franchise, not a lot of success in the National Hockey League. Obviously, we haven't had a Stanley Cup champion from Canada since 1993, so I think fans would be quite happy for Winnipeg. I know there will be those who say all Canadian teams belong next to shocked. I can't do that. Because I think people would just be happy for these teams if they won more than shocked. Vegas Golden Knights, I don't think there's an appetite for Vegas to win again. Now, I'm wearing my Henderson jersey and my Vegas hat, but I will say that if Vegas won again, we would see the Michael Scott reaction from fans, from some in the media as well. The back-to-back cups, I think, would bother people, and I'm not saying I'm one of those people. I think back-to-back champions, I think having a team that's at the top for multiple years, I think it leads to more interest in the league, and I think it's great to have. It kind of then becomes a boogeyman for all the other franchises and all the other fan bases in the NHL, and I think that's good. But I'm old enough to remember the dynasties of the Oilers and the Islanders and that feeling of, wow, we beat that team tonight and how good that felt. And now with the NHL with parity, which is great, but having that team to beat, it can be a lot of fun too. Toronto's an interesting one because now I'm not going to leave it here. I think there'd be a lot of fans who'd be like, well, all right. But you know what? Toronto's been through so much that I'm going to put them here because, again, it's a Canadian team. Toronto's been through a lot over the last 6 years when it comes to their playoffs and inability to get over the hump. They did get out of the first round this year, but there's naysayers about that as well. So I think a majority of fans would be happy for the Leafs. And this has nothing to do with oversaturation of the market, anything with Toronto media and all that. I think in general people would be happy for the franchise and for the team. I know I may be wrong on this, and by all means you can email Yvonne if you think that I'm wrong about this. Pittsburgh, I have to say with Pittsburgh, I don't think people would be angry, but I think I could be a little bit bitter. I think there'd be just that bitter taste of, again, the Penguins, but they haven't won it since 2017. So I don't think people would be actually angry to see the Penguins win it again. You guys can let me know why in the comment section below you would be angry. But I think the general consensus would be, well, I mean, great for them, but can somebody else have it for a while? Can they just not go near it? But so anyways, that's how I feel with that. St. Louis, considering that they're in a retool right now, I would say St. Louis is in the shocked territory. People would be very surprised, I would think, to see St. Louis win a Stanley Cup with their current roster and with how last season went for them. So that brings us to Vancouver. And Vancouver, yeah, oh yeah. There's always been people asking me, so Shannon, as a Canucks fan, what would you do if the Canucks won the Stanley Cup? I can't answer with a straight face. It's never gonna happen, so I really don't have to plan for it. So yeah, shocked face for me. I can't see it. Like, I'd be happy and jubilant if they won. I'd run up and down the streets the whole bit, but I can't see it. I just can't. I'll even take that the replica Stanley Cup I have and just hold it over my head and run up and down the street and get him on to take pictures and videos. I mean, we could do that anyways, right? So we can make that a video. THG going to various areas around the Lower Mainland and running around with the Stanley Cup hooting and hollering. It's not happening. But yeah, Vancouver for me, that would be an absolute shocker. Tampa Bay, I think that would anger people. I do. Tampa Bay had the Cup in 2020 and 2021. There are people who still don't believe those Stanley Cups were legitimate. I covered all the hockey. It was actual hockey. Things happened, and they won the Stanley Cup. But if they won it in 2024, I think people would be angry. Be like, oh, this is stupid. They got those two illegitimate cups. Now they have another one. This is just, the league wants them to win. So I do think with Tampa, I think there'll be some anger. So a Stanley Cup final between Vegas and Tampa, I think the fans would be, not all that happy. All right, Philadelphia. It's a shocker if Philadelphia wins the Stanley Cup. I mean, for this season coming up, I don't see it. I don't think there's a Philadelphia fan on planet Earth that would say, hey, you don't see us winning the Stanley Cup this year? They don't see them winning the Stanley Cup this year. And by they, I mean the fans, and I don't think the team does either. But, all the best, Philadelphia. Prove me wrong. Nashville would be a bit of a surprise, but I'm going to say this. I don't think there's any dislike towards Nashville. Plus, while they're in this retool kind of thing, it doesn't feel like they're completely in a rebuild, and they're 1 year out of a playoff spot. I'm going to put it in between the shocked and happy, where, there'd be a lot of fans, and I would be happy for Nashville, right? Now, I don't cheer for the team, but I'd be happy for the fans. I would be happy to see an organization that's been in the National Hockey League for roughly 25 years getting their first championship. I honestly would be happy for them. But I would still be a bit shocked because of the fact that this offseason they've, let go of Duchesne and Johansson. Seattle, now this is general feeling around the National Hockey League. If Seattle wins a Stanley Cup in their third year, fans won't be happy. Now, there is this perception that you have to go through adversity. You have to go through really rough seasons. Seattle had a rough first season. That's not enough to satiate the needs of the fans. And I would think some of the media as well. If Seattle won a Stanley Cup, I guarantee there would be a lot of, Bettman made this happen. This is because Bettman. It's unfair. The other teams in the league, this is unfair. There would be a lot of that. So Seattle, sadly, so while I would be happy for Seattle, guarantee you Vancouver fans wouldn't be either. There'd be a lot of gnashing of teeth from the Vancouver market with that. So that said, moving along, Ottawa. Now, Ottawa would be a bit of a shock, absolutely. But Ottawa's in a similar position as Washington and Nashville. But considering that they're building and they didn't finish that far out of the playoffs, I think people would genuinely be happy. Now, it's not a surprise to me that I have 3 Canadian teams currently residing at the top of the board because it's been ages since a Canadian team won a Stanley Cup. And I think that people would appreciate and be fine with the Canadian team winning a Stanley Cup, including the Sens. Sens fans have gone through a lot since 2017, the run to almost the final, and then just after that, it's kind of a nightmare. So I do think that there would be wide acceptance of a team from Ottawa winning the Stanley Cup. The New York Rangers, yeah, I think people would be happy for the Rangers. I would as well. First Stanley Cup since 1994, so this would be 30 years in between Stanley Cups. It's a while, but, it's better than going from 1940 to 1994. I'd be happy for guys like Shesterkin, for Panarin, for Zibanejad. There's a lot of guys I like in New York, so I think the Rangers would be seen as an acceptable Stanley Cup champion, where people say, yeah, and I mean, there'd be some who don't cheer for the team, obviously, but I think they'd be happy. The Minnesota Wild. I am going to go out on a limb and say the state of Minnesota, whether it's the Twins, the Timberwolves, the Vikings, the Wild, it's been a rough go for a long time. If a team from Minnesota wins a championship, and I'm looking at the Minnesota Wild here, I think most in the sporting world would be happy with that. I think that Minnesota, and I think Canadian hockey fans would too, because it kind of feels like, Minnesota's northern and it gets really cold in the winter. It kind of feels like a part of Canada. It's not. It really isn't. You still have to cross the border. Make sure you got all your ID ready. But yeah, it does kind of feel like if we added another province and if Minnesota was willing, sure. But yeah, Minnesota's had a lot of misery, and I don't think people would be mad if they won. Which brings us to San Jose. They're in the shock category. I would be absolutely floored if the San Jose Sharks won a championship this year. Of course, we can talk about the era that passed where they were close and they had some really good teams, just didn't win a championship. But yeah, I think people would generally be shocked if the San Jose Sharks won the championship. Which brings us to Montreal. Same thing. Now, again, Montreal, I think people would be happy for the Habs, but I think we'd be very surprised if Montreal was in a position to win a Stanley Cup. The Montreal Canadiens still going through their rebuild. I think they're doing well with their rebuild. I did see a comment on my power rankings yesterday about, he hates the Habs, blah, blah, blah. But it's not hate. It's just this is a team that's still going through it. They're still, I don't think, ready to compete for a Stanley Cup playoff spot. But if they got in, and if they went on a run and they won a Stanley Cup, I think people would be happy. But they'd still be shocked. The New York Islanders. For me with the Islanders, it's been so long since they won a Stanley Cup, since '83. I will say that I think people would be happy for them. I think that's a team that if they won a Stanley Cup, there'd be a lot of people saying, well, the long-suffering fan base, they got the new arena, and so good on them. I really think that would be the opinion, would be, congratulations to the New York Islanders for getting there. You guys can let me know if you think that I'm right on that. Now, Dallas is an interesting one. Dallas, I feel like there would be happiness. I don't think there'd be aggravation, and I don't think people would be angry. So I don't think it'd be, in Pittsburgh's situation. I don't think it'd be in this situation either. I feel like people would be happy for Dallas if they won. So we're up to 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the happy category. And just to sum up, the Jets have never won a Stanley Cup. Toronto last won in 1967. This Ottawa franchise has never won a Stanley Cup. The previous Ottawa Senators franchise, sure, but they moved to St. Louis. The New York Rangers haven't won since 94. The Wild have never won a cup. The Islanders haven't won since 83. And Dallas had their only Stanley Cup in 1999. That's part of the acceptance, too, is that going through pain and going through a long time between cups seems to make fans happier. The LA Kings, I don't think there'd be any kind of anger, or I don't think they're in this category. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since 2014. I don't see any reason why fans wouldn't be happy for them. So for anybody who towards the start of this video is like, he's just going to put all the Canadian teams at the top, incorrect. There's other American teams at the top as well, and I think fans would be happy for the LA Kings. Maybe not Oiler fans, maybe not Vegas fans, maybe not fans of whichever other Pacific Division team they end up taking out to get there, but I do think people would be happy for the Kings organization. Florida won a President's Trophy, and then they get to the Stanley Cup Final. I want to put them in the happy row, and I think that's where they belong. But I also feel like after the run they had in the playoffs this year, and there were some fan bases that weren't happy about it, there might be some that would put them here. But I don't think you belong here if you haven't won a Stanley Cup yet. Nobody can say, we'll take it, but we're not happy about it. Teams never won a Stanley Cup. So the Florida Panthers, again, no Stanley Cups. And I really think that makes a difference. So, yeah, I mean, the top row is filling up because I think a lot of teams in the NHL we're fine with. They're just not the teams that win, generally. Which brings us to New Jersey. Yeah, I don't see any reason why anybody be upset with New Jersey winning a Stanley Cup. They just go right at the top row. I think the New Jersey Devils, that would be... And I'll do a little bit of a ranking at the end here, too, because that always makes it fun, and then you guys can let me know what you think. But the New Jersey Devils, I think people would accept them. I think that would be fine. They made the playoffs last season after a long while outside of the playoffs, and it's nice to see them in the running. Colorado. Now, Colorado, I don't know if Colorado would make people angry. I'm going to put them down here with Pittsburgh. Fans would be, basically, fine, I guess. I don't think it would make people angry, but you guys can let me know. Now, of course, the run that they had to the Stanley Cup final, there were plays that happened in certain series that people got mad about. But I don't necessarily think that means that in 2024, people be like, yeah, I'm still not over that. I don't think I want Colorado to win. Again, you guys can let me know in the comment section below whether you agree with that. But I'm going to put Colorado down next to Pittsburgh. The Oilers. I think people would be happy for the Oilers. I do. I think that with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the team they have there, I think people would be happy for the New York, or for New York. See, and I even used a different colored magnet, and still I see orange and blue, and I go Islanders. It's in my brain. Islanders, no idea. And I do it the other way too, where I see orange and blue here, and I go, and the Oilers. Just, it's one of those things. But yeah, the Oilers, I don't think people be upset if they won it. I don't think so. But again, you guys can let me know. Detroit, there would be a lot of surprise, but Detroit's expected to get better. So I'm going to put them in between. I'm going to put them in between as there being some shock that they win a Stanley Cup, right? Because right now their starter would be Ville Husso. And I like Husso. I'm not saying I don't, but if he won a Stanley Cup, that would be a bit of a surprise. So I'm going to put them on the in-between line there between shock and the overall exuberance of happiness. Columbus has to be in the shock category. And there's no reason for people like, I hate this. Columbus is an organization, I think, that much like Minnesota, they haven't really gone on long runs. They haven't really had that encouragement of great playoff hockey. So it'd be nice to see that change for Columbus, but it would be a shock if they won the Cup this year. Chicago. Now, this is where it's interesting because I could put 2 Chicago logos on the board and be justified. I think there would be complete shock if they won, but anger. They won the Cup in 2010, 2013, and 2015. If Connor Bedard comes in and Connor Bedard leads him to a Stanley Cup in his first year in Chicago, I might need some time off. That might be an ugly comment section for a while. That might be, that might be pretty nuclear for quite some time if Chicago won a Stanley Cup. Calgary, I think there'd be some surprise with everything that's going on in Calgary if they won it. Not total shock. And so I think more towards the happiness side of things, but I think there'd be genuine surprise if we saw a Calgary Flames team win the Stanley Cup. Which, fair or not, I think the shock would be there, and this is where Flames fans say, hey, we didn't finish far behind Winnipeg. No, but Winnipeg at the time I'm recording this still has Hellebuck, they still have Scheifele, and Calgary, there's still all this uncertainty, so it would be quite the surprise. Buffalo. I want to put them here. You know why? Because while we would be very, very happy for Buffalo, it would be an absolute shocker for the Sabres to come in this year, make the playoffs, and then go through all 4 rounds and win their first Stanley Cup in their history. So I'm putting them here because to me, the shock, like the happiness would be there. I would be, you know what? I'll wear a Sabres jersey and run around the neighborhood with a Stanley Cup over my head if the Sabres win it because they came into the league with the Vancouver Canucks and they've been through every bit of the same amount of pain as Vancouver. So I would be quite happy for the expansion brethren of the Vancouver Canucks in the event that they won a Stanley Cup, but it would still be a total shock to see them end up winning it. Carolina, I think people would be happy with Carolina. Now, the way I'm phrasing it like that is because I don't know that everybody would be happy with Carolina winning a Stanley Cup. I think there might be some that aren't, but I'm going to say enough are happy that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 acceptable Stanley Cup champions. Arizona. Well, Arizona belongs in the shock category, right? One of the most surprising Stanley Cup champions would be the Arizona Coyotes. And, I'll even go as far as to say with Mullet Arena hosting Stanley Cup final games, there'd be some people who'd be angry. But for the franchise, I think it'd be a shocker to see them win a Stanley Cup this year. Anaheim Ducks, also a complete shock if they were to win a Stanley Cup. after being 32nd in the standings out of 32 teams. It's really difficult to make up that amount of room in the standings. So I'm going to go ahead and say that it would be a complete shocker for the Ducks to win, which means for shockers, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There you go. Boston. Yeah, Boston belongs here. The Boston Bruins, it doesn't matter. This team could go without a Stanley Cup for 50, 60 years, and there will still be fans saying anybody but the Bruins. So while I'm a Bruins fan, I would be quite happy for them to win a Stanley Cup. I am well aware of how unpopular Boston is, and that if they won a Stanley Cup, fans would get angry. So if I was going to rate... Well, if I was going to rate the anger side, I think is relatively easy. I think people would be most angry if Vegas won. Second most angry if it was Boston, then Chicago, then Tampa, and then Seattle. So that's your 1 through 5 right there. Most acceptable to win a Stanley Cup. Most acceptable. So that'd be people on both sides of the border saying, you know what, that's fine. I'm going to say Minnesota for that. I'm going to say New Jersey at second. I think the Oilers for third. People can let me know in the comment section below. I think, I want to say Winnipeg for fourth. I'll say Toronto fifth. I'll just go to 5. And then with most shocking, I'll go to 5 on this one as well. The most shocking personal, Vancouver. Most shocking, I'll say Arizona. And then I would go with Columbus, Buffalo, Vancouver, San Jose. I'm putting San Jose at 5th, but all 5 of those teams have never won a Stanley Cup. So really could go in any order. But it does feel like Vancouver. I guess, all right, so fine. San Jose 4th, Vancouver 5th. I would be more surprised, personally, to see Vancouver win a Stanley Cup than Philadelphia. Making the playoffs this year, no. I think Vancouver has a better chance. But if they both made the playoffs, I would probably be like, well, I could see Philadelphia going on a run. Vancouver, less likely. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. It's just a fun video to do. Let me know who you think would be the most acceptable Stanley Cup champion. And it doesn't have to be a team you cheer for, just a team that you say, you know what? Long-suffering fans, long-suffering franchise. That seems to be the guideline, or, long-suffering region where they haven't won anything. Hello, Minnesota. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.